Everyone hears about the NBA contracts that players sign every single year. It's public knowledge how much players make, how long they sign for, and all of that. But what usually isn't is certain clauses in players' contracts that earn them more money or extra benefits for certain accomplishments. But I've managed to find and make a list of some of the weirdest and funniest contract clauses that we've ever heard about in NBA history. Now, we all remember Nick Collison, played with OKC off the bench his whole career, and most notably alongside James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook in those early years. Well, during that time, Nick Collison signed an NBA contract, but he wanted it to include a clause that if he ever won the MVP award, he wanted a $100,000 bonus. Why even waste the breath on that? And man, if I'm Nick Collison and I go from playing like him to the MVP of the league, I would want a lot more than a $100,000 bonus. And it just makes you think, did he actually believe that that was a possibility? Or did he just do this as a joke so he could say that he had this clause in his deal? The dude was a non-athletic power forward who never averaged 10 points or 10 rebounds a game, and I'm not trying to roast Collison, but could you just imagine this man coming off the bench for years and one day going out there and putting up 30 and 10 like James Harden did? Yeah, it wasn't gonna happen. But speaking of bench players on potential championship teams, we all remember Mario Chalmers, starting point guard on the championship Miami Heat, the guy that LeBron was never too pleased with. Well, during those championship years, Mario had a clause in his contract that the Heat would give him $20,000 for showing up to the Summer League's conditioning training every year because he was often overweight. And you gotta think, was this something LeBron talked the Heat into adding into Mario's contract because he didn't like how he was showing up to the team every year? All I know is the two had beef, and I'm surprised Chalmers lasted as long as he did on the team without getting traded. On the complete opposite side of things, Michael Jordan needed no extra motivation to be involved with the game, which is why he had a love for the game clause in his contract that said he was allowed to go play pickup games in a park, exhibition games, or play in scrimmages whenever and wherever he wanted. This is something normal NBA players aren't allowed to do. Obviously, players gather together every offseason to play pickup games in the summer, and that's about the extent of what teams will allow. But Chicago gave MJ the right to play at any time in any place, and I don't know. There's some players around the league that don't play and practice enough, but if you have your star player looking for a clause like this in his contract, you know you're onto someone special. The only thing though is, if he's the only NBA player with this in his contract, who's he supposed to be playing against? But Michael Jordan also had another pretty weird contract situation. It wasn't necessarily a clause, this one was more of an agreement between himself and Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf. Well, at the time, MJ going to play baseball was a crazy move, but to thank Jordan for all he had done for the Bulls franchise, Reinsdorf continued to pay Jordan the rest of his $4 million salary while he was still playing baseball. So even though he wasn't on the Bulls anymore, he still got paid as if he was. So while it might have looked like a bad business decision for Jordan to make the switch, at least in terms of money, not much changed for him. Spencer Dinwiddie had the most recent NBA contract clause, and it may be the weirdest I've ever heard. And it's a part of this new deal that he signed this season when he got signed and traded from the Nets to the Wizards. The contract had 5 separate clauses. The first says he'll get a bonus $1.5 million if he plays in at least 50 games in the 2021 and 2022 seasons. So he's halfway done with that one. He would also get a bonus $571,000 if he makes it to the Eastern Conference Finals, which is gonna be pretty hard since he now plays in the West. I mean, how's he gonna have a clause in his contract like that? If he would have just had it say make it to a conference finals in general, then he would have got that bonus this season when Dallas made the Western Conference Finals. But now he'll probably never get that money. If his team ever makes the NBA Finals, he gets a bonus $400,000. $100,000 if they made the second round, which he successfully cashed in on this year. And finally, if Spencer Dinwiddie's team wins an NBA championship, he would get a $1 bonus. Like, how does this even come up? All the other bonuses were for so much money, but a championship would be an extra $1. Man, Dallas really let him down this year. Former NBA player Adonal Foy was an okay bench player for most of his career, and not many people even know or remember him. But if there is one important thing to know about him, it's that he had extreme confidence in himself, because he averaged a career 4 points, 4 rebounds, and 1 block a game. Never averaged over 25 minutes a game in a season or even 6 points a game for a year. And he only made the playoffs once in his career. But in one NBA contract, he made sure to include a clause that said if he was ever named MVP of the league, he would get a $500,000 bonus, or if he ever won Finals MVP, he would get another $500,000. And that's a bold statement. Listen, I appreciate that type of confidence coming from anyone, but when you put the fact that you expect to make MVP and Finals MVP in the same season and put up these type of numbers, it's just pretty embarrassing. You may or may not remember former NBA role player Luke Ridnour. He was an alright player, a 6'1", 175-pound, unathletic point guard. Never really played for any teams that were too great. Well, back in 2006, he had a contract with the Seattle Supersonics that said he would be paid $1.5 million if he was named Defensive Player of the Year. Now come on, any other award I would have understood. Most Improved Player, 6th Man of the Year, Assist Leader. Even an MVP would have made more sense than Defensive Player of the Year for Luke Ridnour, because over the next 5 years after he signed that contract, in 2006, Marcus Camby won the award, then Kevin Garnett won it, then Dwight Howard won it 3 times in a row. And a guard in general didn't even win the award court again until this past year, 16 years later. Now, I mentioned this one in a recent video, so I'll keep it short. But as a rookie coming into the NBA first overall, NBA great Chris Webber signed a 15-year, $74 million contract with the Golden State Warriors. And it was obviously a scam from the team trying to take advantage of a young player that would jump on the opportunity to get that money. And in a normal scenario, he would have already signed that deal and it would have been too late. Chris Webber would have been stuck on the Warriors for his entire career. But for some reason, there was a clause in his contract that allowed him to opt out after the first year if he chose to do so. Like, if you're gonna get a guy to sign a 15-year contract so he'll never leave, why would you then give him the opportunity to leave after one season? It doesn't make sense. But after the first year, he smartened up, realized what the team did, left, never looked back, and made $176 million over his 15-year career instead. But speaking of long NBA contracts, we have one more that's not necessarily a contract clause, but it was worth a mention that the NBA and the Lakers allowed Magic Johnson to sign a 25-year, $25 million deal with the team. It was the only contract of its time and one of the largest in the history of all sports at the time. And considering he only played 12 full seasons in the league and extra money was added to his pay anyways to make up for the league making more money as time went on, this was a really weird deal for the Lakers to have gone through with. Big baby Glenn Davis was mainly known for his days on the Boston Celtics, and he was one of the most underrated physically strong dudes the NBA has ever seen. But that never really translated onto the court, and his weight issues didn't really help that either. All throughout his career he was overweight, and the Boston Celtics tried to put an end to that and offered him a $500,000 bonus in his contract if he hit certain weight points at certain points in the season. Never any official word on if he did, but he was basically going to get paid $500,000 to go on a diet, and it most likely didn't happen. But speaking of big men, NBA Hall of Famer Bill Walton had one of the weirdest contract clauses that he asked to be put in. In 1979, Bill was going to sign with the San Diego Clippers, but he wouldn't sign the contract unless they got him 8 tickets to every single one of Bruce Springsteen's 7 sold-out shows at the Sports Arena. Listen, that's something I feel like he probably still could have taken care of on his own with the amount he was making, but alright, I mean, maybe just ask for a little more money instead, and then you could get the tickets on your own and then have leftover cash, but hey, at least he got the tickets. So he got lucky, but Baron Davis didn't with his contract clause, because Baron Davis was a hot commodity in free agency, so the Clippers were able to sign him by giving him a big contract that also had a $1 million clause in it. He always had a big history with injuries, so the clause was that he had to play in at least 70 games that year, and the Clippers had to win 30 of them. Well, you can't really control injuries, but he got lucky, stayed injury free, and played in 75 games that season, but only won 29 games that year. 29! He was one game away from winning $1 million, and that one just had to hurt. I'm sure they had 29 wins, they already had missed the playoffs, the games were pointless at that point, everyone called it a season, but Baron Davis was out there still in MVP mode trying to win it. Then we have Larry Hughes, who at his peak was a good player, always a double-digit scorer, and put up 22 points and 3 steals a game in his best year. But by 2009, he had already bounced around so many teams and he knew his career was coming to an end, so at this point he didn't care anymore. All he wanted to do was make money and win an NBA championship, and he was so confident he was going to make that happen on whatever team that he was on that he had a clause put in his contract that said for whatever team he ended up on, he would get a $1.6 million bonus if that team won 55 games that year. Well, that season he played on the Knicks, who went 29-53, and the Hornets, who finished 44-38 and got swept in the first round. Listen, I appreciate the confidence, but that wasn't it. Tony Batty was mostly always a backup center that never averaged double-digit points or rebounds in his career, but he was still a solid player. Now in 2009, he found himself on the New Jersey Nets with a salary of about $6 million, but that wasn't enough. He wanted more incentives added to his contract, so he wanted an extra $100,000 if he played in 50 games and averaged at least 8 rebounds, another $100,000 if he averaged 5 free throw attempts, and another $100,000 if he was active for 50 games and he made the playoffs. Now this made sense because he had played over 50 games in 10 out of his 11 seasons before this, but never averaged 8 rebounds or 5 free throw attempts in his career, so it got a little weird. But then it didn't even matter because he played 15 games that season. And just while we're at it, his team didn't make the playoffs and they finished with a 12-70 record. Plus he averaged 1.5 rebounds and 0.7 free throw attempts a game. And that's the point where the team should have just been taking away $100,000 for him for playing so bad. But that's gonna wrap things up. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. I'm out.